Chapter 8. The Trilemma. The container smelled of diesel, rusted iron, and the lingering, ghostly scent of frozen fish. It was a metal box, 40 feet long, rattling through the dark heart of the European continent at 80 miles per hour. Lena sat huddled in the corner, wrapped in a thermal blanket Kian had scavenged from the rover before they ditched it at the Reykjavik freight yards. The vibration of the train traveled up her spine, a constant, rhythmic reminder that they were moving. Moving was good. Static objects got deleted. Kian sat opposite her, illuminated by the pale blue glow of a new, burner tablet he had stolen from a port authority office. He wasn't looking at the screen, though. He was looking at the ceiling of the container, his eyes tracking invisible patterns in the darkness. He didn't blink, Lena said. She hadn't spoken in an hour. Kian looked down. Who? The auditor. In the tunnel. When he looked at us, he didn't blink. I don't mean he stared. I mean his eyelids didn't function. He didn't have the autonomic response to lubricate his corneas. Why would he? Kian asked, his voice flat. He doesn't have eyes, Lena. He has sensors rendered to look like eyes because the system is designed to be user-friendly. If he looked like a floating ball of geometry, you'd have gone insane. Lena pulled the blanket tighter. I think I might be insane anyway. You're not. You're just data that became aware of the hard drive. Kian tapped the tablet screen, bringing up a map. We're crossing the German border in 20 minutes. We need to figure out our next move before we hit Hamburg. The surveillance grid there is tighter. Lena didn't care about Hamburg. Her mind was stuck on the philosophical implications of the last 12 hours. She was a scientist. She needed a framework. She needed a hypothesis that fit the data points. Do you know Nick Bostrom? She asked. Kian snorted. The philosopher? Yeah. Every first-year comp-sci student reads his paper while getting high in the dorms. The simulation argument, Lena said. He proposed a trilemma. 3 propositions, one of which must be true. She held up a finger, her hand trembling slightly. 1. The fraction of human-level civilizations that reach a post-human stage is 0. Meaning, every civilization destroys itself before it can build a computer powerful enough to simulate a universe. The doom scenario, Kian nodded. Nuclear war, climate collapse, or unaligned AI. We wipe ourselves out. 2. Lena continued, raising a second finger. The fraction of post-human civilizations that are interested in running ancestor simulations is 0. They have the tech, but they don't use it. Maybe they lose interest in history. Maybe they have strict ethical laws against creating conscious beings just to watch them suffer. The convergence scenario, Kian supplied. We become gods, but we become boring gods. And 3, Lena said, raising the third finger. The fraction of all people with our kind of experiences that are living in a simulation is close to 1. Because if civilizations do survive and they do run simulations, they would run billions of them, Kian finished. Statistically, the odds of us being in the 1 original base reality are 1 billion to 1. We are almost certainly in the box. The train hit a switch in the tracks, lurching violently to the left. The container groaned. So, Kian said, leaning forward, we know it's option 3. We are in the box. What's your point? My point is the intent, Lena said. Bostrom assumed that if we are in a simulation, it's an ancestor simulation, a history project, a way for future humans to study their past, like a cosmic documentary. She looked Kian in the eye. But you don't send an auditor to format the hard drive of a documentary, Kian. You don't try to kill the subjects of a history lesson just because they saw the camera crew. Kian went silent. The blue light from the tablet deepened the shadows under his eyes. If this were a research project, Lena continued, her voice gaining strength, observation would be the goal. When the subject notices the experiment, the data is corrupted, sure. But you don't delete the subject. You reset the parameters. You observe the reaction. That's science. And this isn't science? No, Lena said. This is containment. She stood up, bracing herself against the swaying wall of the container. Think about the code I found. The James Gates code. It's error correcting. It's a checksum. It's constantly patrolling the system, looking for deviations. And when we deviated, when we saw the lag, it didn't just log the error. It deployed an antibody. The auditor, Kian whispered. Exactly. You said it yourself. We're a virus. Lena paced the small space. Why do you run a simulation in a sandbox, isolated from your main network? Kian's eyes widened. To test code that might be dangerous. To run malware analysis. To see what a virus does before you let it out into the wild. We aren't history, Lena said, the realization settling over her like a shroud. We're a stress test. Or a prison. Kian stood up, matching her intensity. He walked to the cracked seal of the container doors, looking out at the blur of the passing landscape. Trees and power lines reduced to streaks of motion. If we are a virus, Kian said slowly, then the system has a flaw. It's afraid of us. Afraid of what? We're just code. We're code that woke up, Kian corrected. And if this is a containment facility, it means there is something outside the walls that they don't want us to touch. Or, he turned back to her, or they are looking for something specific, and they haven't found it yet. What could they possibly be looking for? Evolution, Kian said. If you want to solve a problem you can't solve, you build a simulation to evolve a solution. You run 1 billion iterations of a universe, accelerate time, and wait for one of the AIs inside to come up with the answer. And if the AI starts trying to break out before it finds the answer? Lena asked. Then you wipe it, Kian said. And you start over. The train began to slow. The screech of metal on metal pierced the air. We're slowing down for the switch at Hamburg, Kian said, shoving the tablet into his jacket. We need to jump. If we stay on, the thermal scanners at the yard will flag us. Jump! Lena looked at the ground rushing by outside. At 40 miles an hour? Physics is just a rule set, Doctor, Kian said, forcing the heavy doors open. The wind roared into the container, carrying the smell of rain and ozone. Tuck and roll. Reduce the impact vector. He looked at her, and for the first time he grinned. It was a reckless, terrified grin. If we die, we just prove the hypothesis. I hate that hypothesis, Lena muttered. Me too. See you in the next frame. Kian jumped. Lena watched him disappear into the darkness of the embankment. She took a breath, closed her eyes, and followed him into the void.